This looks like something amazing someone would draw. Look at Andrea's. Yeah. Okay, we got Pooja. I like that. Some are really similar. I can't see yours, Robin. It's got some raindrops, some raindrops. Ooh, Clara's got a really scary cloud. I love it, guys. Okay, now you're probably saying to yourself, this is the most random activity to do in the beginning, but I promise we're gonna get there. I didn't tell you to get your tiny eraser out, but get your tiny eraser and erase it, because we're gonna do one more. All right, everybody looks prepared. The next word is letter. Letter. Terry's going, I didn't hear that right. Letter. I love it. I love the differences. That's exactly what we were hoping to see. So I picked these kind of at random, these words, but also because I knew that they would have different meanings for most of us. So when I said rain, I told Alondra earlier that if I said rain, then I would think of yesterday getting stuck out in the rain with all of our kids trying to deliver stuff to some of my CASA kids. But then I shockingly forgot my brother's name is Rains too. So when people say Rain, that's usually what I think of is my brother. So I might have drawn a stick figure of him or my kids, you know, in the car with me in the rain. And then letter, I love that some of you guys drew like a letter, the letter A, which is actually what I was thinking, the letter A. And I thought maybe you guys would add like A to Z, things like that. But many of you drew either a handwritten letter or an envelope. So we had really different ideas about one word when we say one word. And we wanted to start with that activity tonight, just a short way to test your drawing skills, because that's how we judge all of our advocates here at CASA, is whether they're good artists or not. No, I'm just kidding. But we wanted to start with that because tonight we're going to be talking about trauma and resilience. When we start out, we'll start with resilience and then head into trauma. And we wanted to start with this activity because we know that we all experience trauma in our life. It might be that we had a traumatic childhood in the sense of trauma and the way we're going to talk about it tonight. It could be that we had a traumatic childhood because we suffer from anxiety, or we had a significant person in our life pass away, or we had a really terrible school experience. But most of us have some sort of trauma, whether it's just a bad day at work. We experience trauma. The thing is, we all experience trauma really differently. And that can color the way we experience many other things. So when we are talking about resilience tonight and we are talking about trauma tonight, we want you guys to keep that in mind, that when we experience trauma, just like the way we experience different letters and different way we think about rain, it's still completely okay to experience things differently and to have a different feeling or a different reaction to trauma, and to remember that when we're working with families. So I am going to ask Alondra to hop up here with me, and I think she's ready to hop up here with me, and we are going to start talking about resilience. As I'm making way, as I'm making room for her up here, I want to also remind you guys about the feelings thermometer. And I saw a couple of you guys see, and now I'm seeing that Clara was correcting me. It's the lightning in a puddle, not a scary, terrifying rain cloud. That makes me feel better, Clara. But you guys, I want you to pull your feelings thermometer out. You can find it in your binder, but you can also find it in that blue portfolio that you would have had in your bag. And we want you guys to have that on hand tonight to be able to refer to, because we're going to talk about a couple of things that can be a little bit more heavy. And Alondra's going to warn you about those before we get deep into it, but have it handy just so you can check in with yourself. I will say that tonight we are starting with resilience, even though when we say it, we tend to say trauma and resilience. We're starting with resilience first, intentionally. And we're starting with that first because, as I said, everyone experiences trauma in some way. but we also have the opportunity to build resilience. And trauma is not necessarily something that we have control of as CASAs when we're working with kids. Many times they've already experienced that trauma, but we can make a huge contribution to resilience. Resilience is something that can be built. It is not just innate. It's not something that we all necessarily just have in abundance, but it's something that we can build. And we want to start with that and start with that positive lead so that when we do talk about ACEs and we do talk about trauma, it doesn't feel like something that we're stuck in and something that we can't do anything about. So now I'm going to let Alondra share with you guys about resilience.
Hey guys, it's good to see everybody again. Okay, so we're going to be looking at page 6 in your binder with our first activity. It's Resilience Activity 3A. Give everybody just a minute to flip to that. All right. So for the first part of this activity, I want you to think about a time of adversity in your life. And think about a person that was in your life that helped you overcome this. And then I'm going to ask somebody to share. So just give you a few minutes to think about that. And think about somebody that was especially helpful to you. What was it that they did, or what was it that they said that made you overcome or made you feel better and helped you to maybe look at this particular situation in a different view or different lenses? Okay. Does anybody want to volunteer, or should I pick? Okay, Amy, make sure you unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It was the summer of 1983. Some of you probably weren't born, but I had a young baby at home, and on my way home from a meeting, I stopped at the Kmart out on Parish Avenue and went in to buy a curtain rod. I came out as the store was closing, and there was a van. I was the only car, and the van was the only van in the parking lot because they were closing. And first the lady inside, the cashier was making fun of my long hyphenated last name. She told me that was really silly and she had never seen a name that long and what was wrong with me that I would have chosen to do that. So I was revved up a bit. You know, I tried to be polite, but I left there kind of pissy at her. So I get outside and I see this van parked in the handicap parking lot. Handicap parking spot, and something just made me mad about that. I thought it doesn't look like a vehicle a handicapped person would drive. And as I walked to get into my car, and I had my keys out and I put it in the door, this was before we had all the little buttons to push, and just as I turned the lock, a man stepped out of the van and grabbed me. Now, my purse fell, the keys fell, my arm with the curtain rod tightened. And so as I'm getting ready, as he's pulling me back, I took the curtain rod and I jammed it up into his face. So he started yelling and screaming at me and complaining his eye, and he got down to get his glasses, and I got in my car and locked the door and hoped that he wouldn't get the key to come after me because there was nobody else around. So I sat there after he left for quite a while, just too shaken up to drive. And when I got home and I told my husband, he was the voice of calm. Okay, we need to call the police. Did you call the police yet? We need to take care of this. You know, he doesn't know where you live. He didn't write down your license plate number. So he helped me through it.
He was that
I
one.
remember walking into my baby's room and sitting on the floor next to her crib. And that's when I just started crying, thinking she wouldn't have known me.
Mm-hmm. That's devastating. I can't imagine going through anything like that. Your bravery is just amazing.
No, it just kicked in.
Yeah, motherly instinct.
I didn't feel brave afterwards.
Yeah.
You know.
That's yeah.
So who can top that?
The what?
Who can top that?
Yeah.
Nobody can top that. If you can, I can't take that trauma tonight. Please don't try to top that, okay? But I'm sitting over while she's talking, I'm going to Rosemary like, Amy is so tough, okay? And that, I think, is part of trauma and resilience, is even though it's traumatic, that resilience kicks in. It's been a couple of years, but you can talk about it now, and you can and remember it in a healthy way. So thank you so much for sharing that. And now I feel really powerful just hearing the story. So I appreciate you sharing that toughness with us.
Yes, thank you so much. I think, do we have time for one more maybe? Does anybody else want to share something in their life that they had a specific or a person help them through it, or help them look at that situation a different way? No. Well, usually I talk about my husband a lot. So he, for me, is, I guess, the voice of reason and helps me calm me down and unstresses me. He can tell whenever I'm very stressful. Like today, we went to go sign for the loan to our house, and everybody was running late. He was running late. The law attorney office was running late, and we had to prepare for this training, and I had to make sure somebody had Gracie, and I was just overwhelmed. And he said, you know, this situation, us living with his parents, is not forever. You know, it's just for 2 more months, hopefully. And he says, just please, you know, try to take a few breaths, just maintain, be calm, and we will get through this together. And that is something that Rosemary says all the time. We will get through this together, especially through this pandemic. So thank you so much for sharing that, Amy. We really appreciate that. We are going to talk, like Ashley was saying, about resilience. So resilience is something that children are not born with. We are able to help them grow their resilience. And we do that by being that one constant person in their life and building them up, giving them those extra reinforcement factors in their lives, telling them that they're able to do the things that they don't believe they can, giving them those extra positive phrases, and also when something goes wrong, saying that it's going to be okay. You know, they're going to learn from the situation and be better for it. Ashley, do you want to add anything to that?
I do, but
yes.
It's because I'm starting the PowerPoint.
I'm sorry. There, thank you.
Yeah, there we go.
Yay.
That's what I wanted to add to it.
Yes, yes. So the phrase that Ashley put up there, when I was a boy, I would see scary things in the news. My mother would say to me, look for helpers. You will always find people who are willing to help. And that is so true. There's always a person around, a teacher, a CASA, a friend, a mentor, somebody that is willing to provide that shoulder or that helping hand for you, or for our CASA, or our children that we serve. Do we want to move to our next slide? Maybe? All right, let's talk about the 7 C's of resilience. So Ashley is popping in.
I'm just getting the right note.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was making room for Ashley. But the 7 C's of resilience is competence. So in competence, we talk about making our children competent enough where they know that they're able to understand the situation and grow from the situation. Thank you, Ashley. We have a handy clicker now. Yay. And allowing them to understand that they are able to grow when those situations are presented to them throughout their lives. So competence, and that goes into confidence, you know. So young people need confidence to be able to navigate through the world and to think outside of the box and recover from those challenges. So recover from being placed in a different foster home and not being with their families, being able to cope with that. And then connections, making connections with people, like their CASAs, making connections with the school, or the guidance counselor. Children need those type of connections to be able to feel secure and to be able to feel like they belong. And we want to make sure that as CASAs, provide that to them as well. Tell them, I am here to help you. I am here for you. They see a lot of people throughout their family court process. So they may see several social workers throughout that process, but we need to make sure that they realize that I am your CASA and I am here for you. I will be here until this case is closed, until we find permanency for you. We don't know what that looks like at this moment, but you can count on me to be here for you, which is very powerful for the child too to hear. And then character, you may have, people have a clear sense of right and wrong and communicate to integrity. So we want to make sure that they mistrust people a lot through this process. They don't know who to trust, who to count on. So we want to make sure that as CASAs, we're showing them that we're genuine with them and they can trust us. Ashley.
Now I'm butting in, and it's because she just inspired me so much. So when we were talking about this and talking about her sharing with you guys the 7 C's of resilience, we talked about maybe if we would share a story or talk about one of our kids, but she totally inspired me when she talked about how that connection and a relationship with their CASA can make a difference. So I'm going to share just a really short, hopefully short, I talk too much, but a short story with you guys about one of my CASAs. And I'm going to share her name, but not the child's name. Her name is Marcia, and she's wonderful. And she has just amazing qualities, but she's been a CASA for about 3 years, and she's on her 3rd case, but she's had that same case for just right at 2 years. And her little CASA child, it's one kid, and he just turned 7, and he was brought into care when he was about 4 and a half. And from the time he was 4 and a half until he was 6, he was in like 13 different placements. And that's not atypical for a foster child, but it's fairly atypical for a foster child that young. He did have a lot of extreme behavior issues though, and that made it hard for anybody to hang on to him. He was not only in that many different placements, but he was also in a couple of different facilities, a couple of them for longer periods of time. River Valley a couple of times, Home of the Innocents a couple of times. But also it's important to note that he didn't have a lot of connections with a home base, like a mom or dad. His mom only attended about 6 visits during that time. He has no siblings. And his father returned to Mexico, and we haven't heard from him any since before the case started. So no connection. So you can already see where in these 7 C's of resilience, when he started out, he did not have really any of these factors. Not a lot of competence because of his age and the lack of interaction he'd had with people. No confidence because of that lack of confidence. No connection, and no ability to build character. So you see that really poor behavior and a lot of those things happening, which lead to limited contribution, poor coping skills, and absolutely no self-control or control over situations around them. But I want to brag on Marcia because she did make all the difference for him. Not only did he have all those placements and all of those stays and facilities, but he also had, I want to say, 7 different social workers. So he had no consistent foster parent, no consistent social worker, but he had Marcia. He had Marcia from day one. He got Marcia appointed to his case really early on in the case, and she stuck it out with him. She was there when foster parents would call and say, he is spitting at me, somebody's got to come get him. She would say, I can't come get him, but I'll come watch him with you, and I'll ride it out with you, and she would do it. And she has stuck with this little adorable hellcat of a little boy for just over 2 years. And in the last 6 months, this little boy has started to build these resilience factors because Marcia has been there for him, and Marcia has advocated for a really positive foster placement for him. So he's been in the same placement for 5.5, 6 months now, and he's building competence. Now he's repeating kindergarten, but he's in kindergarten and he's able to complete his assignments at home. He's building confidence and being able to do that and interact with his peers. Now he has a connection not only to Miss Marcia, is what he calls her, to Miss Marcia, but also to his foster parents. And he is starting to build character. He is starting to be able to make the right decision even when no one is looking, and to be able to do the right thing and to regulate, to the point that now his foster parents had just kept him in the home because he had so many behavior issues. And last month they were able to bring more kids into the home. So he's even contributing to helping them. So when we talk about resilience in the 7 C's of resilience, I can definitely be inspired by what Alondra was saying about CASA making a difference, because not only is she able to advocate for him in court and be able to get things like really high quality mental health services for him, or a really positive foster placement where he has support in the home, but just her being there for him, her showing up 2 times a month, her bringing him his favorite Ryan's World toy, even though she doesn't understand what Ryan's World is, bringing him a Batman blanket, making something as small as she got him a little stuffed Batman in his first placement, and he has asked for it every time, and she makes sure it goes from placement to placement with him. So little things like that, being that consistent person, being there and showing up every time, has not just made a difference in the court system. It hasn't just shortened his stay in any of the court involvement, but it has actually allowed him to build some of these skills as he went along. So I'm sorry, I didn't talk this over with Alondra. She might be mad because I jumped in. I don't think she is.
Not at all.
But I was so inspired by what she was saying about CASA that I wanted to share with you guys that these are not just ideas that we think about. They're not just things that could happen. They are real. They are real to kids. And one consistent, caring adult can make all the difference for a child.
Who knew that was the second slide? I accidentally clicked the clicker. So let's go back to the other one. Thank you, Ashley, for sharing that with us. We were talking about contribution to resilience. So when I talk about contribution, my son, as Ashley probably has mentioned, we are doing homeschooling here at CASA. So my son is big into Beyblades. I don't know if anybody knows what that is, but the little spinning toy that Ashley's kids have now learned what they are and love them. So when my son was first doing them, Ashley's kids didn't know how to get those to work and stuff. So he was like, hey, here, let me help you. And that made my son feel like he was contributing to the well-being of, you know, Ashley's kids, like making them feel welcome, making them feel like they were belonging to that game, to that part of playing. So when kids are able to feel good about things, they're more able to go to other adults when it's appropriate for them to tell them what is going on. And that is very important as well. So talking about coping, what comes up to my mind is stress, trying to cope with stress. There are very many different ways that children, even adults, cope with stress, you know, healthy, unhealthy ways. We want to make sure we empower the children with healthy ways to cope stress, you know, allowing them to talk about what's going on, giving them a hug. Some kids just would rather prefer just to be alone for some time, to kind of think about what's going on. But we want to make sure that children have the, I guess, essentially right or more healing ways to cope with stress. And then control is very big for me because I love to give control to my children. Like, I love to give Gavin choices. I like to empower him to feel like he is in control of what he wears for school. I give him a couple choices and he is able to pick from that. I ask him, Gavin, what do you want for lunch? We have this, this, and this, and he's able to pick for that. And that empowers him to feel like he has control over what he eats. Essentially, I have control because I am only giving him 3 choices but he feels like he's, you know, having the majority of that control. So we will move on to the slide that says one consistent caring adult, which is what you guys are going to be. And we're pausing.
And we're pausing again because I totally let Alondra down again. So the next page that you guys should have is the resilience questionnaire. That should be page 8. And again, I have facilitated this training many times now. This is Alondra's first time facilitating it. So when we were going over which parts of it she was going to handle, I was like, listen, Alondra, it's really important that you tell them before we do any of this that they can't take the resilience questionnaire or the ACEs questionnaire during training. We can't take it at all. So we need to tell them that beforehand. She's like, oh my gosh, I'm afraid I'm going to forget. So you get up there and you say it first. And guess who forgot to say it when it was her turn? Me. So I'm going to remind you guys of that now. She's going to talk a little bit about the resilience questionnaire and a little bit about the ACEs questionnaire too. You may already be familiar with those things, but if you're not familiar with them, I know you're going to be tempted to just run through those and answer them for yourself and circle them and add up your resilience score and your ACEs score. We do not want you to do that tonight. And the feelings thermometer is up on your screen because we want you to be mindful that when you do take the resilience questionnaire, you do take the ACEs questionnaire, if that's something that you choose to do, it can bring up a lot of feelings that you may not have dealt with as well as you might have thought you did before, or it may bring up memories that you didn't remember, or it may just make you aware of your ACE score that you didn't know of before. It might be really positive, but it might be really negative, and we don't want you to do it in this training space where we're throwing a lot of other information at you because we don't want to stress you guys out or put you in a difficult position while we're in person or on Zoom. So when we do talk about these, again, we want you to look at them, to go over them, but try not to just answer them and tally them up for yourself while you're here. If you want to do that, you can always do that on your own, but we would encourage you to have a strong support system around you or have somebody that you're really comfortable calling and talking about it, because we know that even for us, when we take the ACEs score or the ACEs questionnaire for the first time, followed with the resilience questionnaire, it can bring up a lot of feelings and make us have a lot of feelings, and we don't want to make anyone uncomfortable or more uncomfortable than necessarily we need to here tonight. So as we get into that, we're going to talk about the feelings thermometer. And again, I want to remind you that that is in your blue portfolio, and that just as we go through this, if you start feeling uncomfortable, if you're checking out, if you're really bored, if you're having any of those things, we're going to try to watch your faces and make sure that we're trying to be attentive to that, but you take care of yourself too. If you need to turn your camera off, if you need to step away from the computer for just a few minutes, please feel comfortable doing that. We want you to be comfortable doing that. And you can always review in your binder or watch back over the video at a later time. So I'm going to invite Alondra to come back and go on. And I apologize to you guys and her that I didn't remind you guys of that when I had my opportunity earlier.
Thank you so much, Ashley. She's amazing, by the way. Okay, so as you can see on page 8 of your binder, that is where you'll find the resilience questionnaire. And like she was saying, please don't fill that out right now. One thing I do want to draw to your attention is a little bit more about resilience. A lot of children and people go through similar and sometimes not so similar situations, but the type of resilience and type of support system that they have depends or makes how they overcome those situations. So like Ashley said earlier, we can build resilience at a young age and help them overcome that. And Ashley had a great story about her husband, actually, when it comes to resilience. And I would like for her to come up here and talk about that, because I don't think I can top that story.
I'm getting a workout, guys, because I'm just sitting down, standing up, walking around the screen, and just jumping back and forth. I got to get myself together tonight. But thanks, Alondra, for inviting me back up here. I told her about it. I didn't realize I was going to share it tonight, but all of my coworkers already know it. My husband has a high ACE score. I don't, so that makes it sometimes interesting to be living at our house. But when I started learning about ACEs, I would say probably 6 years ago, I read the book Hillbilly Elegy, which is a really interesting book, but he discusses ACEs. That was the first time I had been introduced to them. And I am pretty passionate about adverse childhood experiences, and I've learned a lot about it and started talking about it all the time to my husband. And finally he said, okay, let me take this ACEs questionnaire, which is one of the ways that I learned that it's not necessarily appropriate for everyone to just sit down at the dinner table and take it one night, because his ACE score is very high. And we talked about it, and I had been telling him all these terrible numbers and all the poor outcomes that might come along with the ACEs questionnaire having a high ACE score. And he said, you know, Ashley, I'm not going to say that this is BS, but this is BS because I'm fine. I'm a healthy adult. I'm married. I have healthy kids. I have a good relationship with my brother. I went to college. I'm not sick. I don't take any medicine. I never have. I'm not obese. I don't smoke. I don't have any of these things that people talk about. And he, you know, kept going, and I thought, you know what? He's right. Maybe he's just that awesome. I don't know. But when we started looking into it, we also found the resilience questionnaire. And we looked at the resilience questionnaire, and we started looking at it really hard, and we realized that he may have had a really high ACE score, but he had an even higher resilience score. And then we started thinking about the other people in his life, like his sibling. And his sibling also has a very similar ACE score, but has not had as many successes, has more issues, and their lives have kind of gone in different directions. His brother's also awesome in his own way, but they definitely have different levels of functionality. And when we started thinking about that, we also talked about the resilience questionnaire and those resilience aspects. And what we realized is that they had different influences in their life. My husband was involved in sports from a really young age. He was involved in church from a really young age. And he also has a different set of grandparents than his brother has. And all of those people poured into him so that he could check off every single one of those resilience factors. He had every single one of those. So even though he had a high ACE score, he had a higher resilience score and was able to then overcome a lot of those things in a really different way than somebody who might not have also had the resilience factors. So I think that's the story that Alondra wanted me to share, is that I can see these play out in real life and at my own house, in my own family. I can see how ACEs impact the way my husband's brain works, but I can also 110% see the way that resilience and those resilience factors and support can make someone's brain work and can help them develop from the time they're born right into adulthood, where we still have some of those support systems. Literally, his high school teacher is still in Bible study with me because he's had so many great supports in his life. So never think for a second that CASA can't make that big of a difference, even for a short time that they're involved, because they make a huge impact, and it really does change the way a child might experience the results of their trauma. And I'm going to invite Alondra back.
Thank you. That is a great way to wrap up resilience. We are going to start talking about trauma, which is why the feelings thermometer is up right now. Once again, just be aware of your feelings and be aware of your comfortable and uncomfortable situations, and just make a mental awareness of that. So on page 10 of your binder, which is where we're at now, we are going to be preparing to talk about trauma for activity 3B. So in that activity, you can find a quote by Walt Whitman. Does anybody want to read that out loud for us?
I think Terry does.
Terry's our school teacher.
Just kidding. Okay, yeah, she does. I was like, maybe she changed her mind.
I don't see a,
So it's on page 10.
oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. It's all right.
Oh, she doesn't even have her binder, guys. We can shame her for not having a binder.
Oh, she found it.
Okay. There was a child went forth every day, and the first object he looked upon, the object he became, and that object became part of him for the day, or a certain part of the day, or for many years, or stretching cycles of years.
Thank you, Terry. So we want to talk, do you guys have anything to share to that poem? What does that make you think of? Does anybody have their hand up? I can't see everybody.
Shaw's thinking about it.
Oh, yes.
I'm trying to find the raise hand button. So participants raise hand. Do you see it?
Do we see it? No, I don't see it.
Oh. Lower hand, raise hand. Okay. Well, I guess for me, the first thing I thought of when I looked at this quote and read it was like adapting.
Yes. So can you elaborate for that? Like the child adapting over his period of time throughout his life. Yes, I like it, Shy. Thank you.
Yeah, no
Heather?
problem.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. My dog is starting to talk, so I'm going to go back on mute.
Okay, Heather?
It just made me think of, it's simplistic, I guess, is what I took from it, of what a child, so if a child wakes up in the morning and has a happy experience, or, I mean, sees mom and dad kiss before they go to school, then that's what they are the rest of the day. They have that comfortable, happy feeling. Otherwise, you know, waking up and seeing mom and dad fighting, and then that's kind of what they became the rest of the day. Is that's weighing on them? Is that what it's going to be when I get home today? That's what it made me think of.
Yes, I love your response as well. I think you guys are both correct. You know, the child, what they experience may go through them throughout that day, throughout that year, or throughout their life, which can affect the child in different ways and how they react. Like you were saying, Heather, like if they see their parents kissing every day before they go to school, before they go to work, then that child will probably demonstrate those same habits when the child gets older. So just having that sort of, you know, everyday positive things is what's going to affect that child in the long term. So we are going to talk about the ACE calculator, which is on page 10. And this was the questionnaire that Ashley was also talking about to not complete during training. Once again, make sure when you do complete this, just to have a support system or that person you can call upon or talk to them about what your score may be. Ashley, remind me about his name. How do you pronounce that?
So I might not be pronouncing it correctly either, but when we talk about adverse childhood experiences and the ACEs questionnaire, this was developed by a team, but really Dr. Vincent Felitti is one of the founding members of the team, and he collaborated through Kaiser Permanente and the CDC. They were doing, I'm still in the reins, sorry, you didn't ask me, but they were doing a study actually on obesity. And when they were asking questions about obesity and, you know, trying to get some information from their people that they were doing a study on. And as a side note, the study group was mostly white, college educated, and all had insurance. So we're talking about like a pretty good group where you would think they would have low ACEs, low trauma, low exposure to many of these things. But what they found is that by accident, one of them asked the question, in a series of questions, they accidentally misspoke and asked, what weight were you the first time you had sex? And of course he meant age, but he asked weight, because they were talking about weight a lot. And the participant responded 40 pounds. And he was like, wrote it down. He was like, time out. I wasn't supposed to ask that question, but also tell me more about 40 pounds. And she had been sexually assaulted when she was a very young child, about 4 years old, by a parent. And so he was like, okay, now she's struggling with obesity, among other things. And they started looking at the participants in a different way and asking a lot of questions. And they came up with this specific ACEs questionnaire to determine how many adverse childhood experiences a person might have encountered, and then how that may have translated to different issues into adulthood. And some of those were obesity, a predisposition to diabetes, heart disease, mental health issues, suicidality. There were just a team of issues that they would see were much higher in people who had experienced 4 or more ACEs. And they kind of said the magic number was 4. They found that about 60% of people had experienced at least one ACE. So most people in this group of college educated people with insurance had experienced at least one ACE. But about a third of them had experienced 4 or more, and that's where they were seeing some of these issues that were popping up. So they kind of started developing this and putting it out to the rest of the population. They found that a lot of these numbers were true across many populations. So you might be thinking, wow, if you hadn't heard of this, like, this must be brand new information, but it's not. It's actually not brand new information. It's been around a long time. I started learning about it 6 years ago. I should have asked you guys in the beginning how many, like, to raise your hands and tell us how many people have heard of it. I won't ask you to now because you all have now, but we know that this is not something that everyone knows, but it's something that we want everyone to know. So I'm going to invite Alondra back to tell you guys. Oh, she's like, no, you're not going to do that. so I'm going to invite her up here to stay next to me, and we're going to both talk to you about it. So when we talk about adverse childhood experiences, we are not just talking about a tough time or something rough that happened in childhood, although those things can be traumatic too. When we talk about ACEs for the purposes of our training tonight, we're talking about those 10 specific events that we have data to support, and we have information about how those can impact what you are doing. We sometimes go over each of those and go over the questions, but we also find that people are just too tempted to answer those 10 questions and go ahead and take the questionnaire. So we're not going to do that tonight. What we are going to talk about is how they can impact people and impact a case and impact that generational trauma. So stress, and also I believe you guys watched a video about adverse childhood experiences, but if you did not, I will make sure that I add it on, because no one explains this better than a lovely doctor in a red dress who just gives a perfect description of this. But most of us experience trauma. If you're looking at your screen right now, you see acute, chronic, complex, and historical. So acute might be just one event, something really bad that happens one time. So maybe this event is a spanking. I will not tell on Alondra or myself, but I will say that one of our children had a very traumatic spanking experience where they believe they were spanked. No parents, none of the 4 parents involved remember any of this child being spanked. But he is confident that he was spanked one time.
That's my kid. He believes he was spanked. This is the same kid that I've told before, Gavin, if you're not good, you will go into timeout. And he looks at me and says, what is timeout? So that's the same kid.
We believe it's a false memory, but to him, it was an acute traumatic experience. One time, he doesn't get spanked all the time, but he thinks one day his mom pulled over and spanked him. I think there's a good chance he saw it in a movie. But that's an acute, stressful situation. Chronic is longer lasting. It could be, he got spanked every day. He had really poor behavior all the time and got spanked all the time. complex adds in a lot of other factors. So sometimes he gets spanked, sometimes he gets put in timeout, sometimes he gets grounded, sometimes I'm trying not to get super physical so Alondra doesn't get upset about me talking about our son. None of these things, by the way, happened to him. He's a very good child, but complex would be a lot of other factors. Historical would be adding in generations and over time. So he may, right now he's just a little boy, but say he's 15 and he's still getting spanked, and he's been spanked since he was 15 months old, and his dad got spanked before that. In fact, his grandma still gets out the wooden spoon and smacks his dad on the hand when he steals a cookie at her house. Then we're looking at generational and historical ACEs and trauma that are happening over a much longer period of time to one person or to several generations of family as well. And with ACEs, I tried to make it silly because this is such a heavy topic. But when we talk about ACEs, that is typically what we see. I'm sure that you've heard about generational trauma, generational poverty, generational issues with abuse and neglect. And the ACEs study really highlights that this can be because of the changes in the brain that occur due to adverse childhood experiences and the way they shape the way a person responds, right down to their very DNA. So when we think about ACEs and we think about families, very often we say, how could a parent do that? And we say, when we say that, or when we think that, usually we're thinking from our own perspective, like how I could not do that, or how could a mother do that? How could a father do, how could an aunt do that? But it's important to remember that their brain has been shaped by the lived experiences that they have had. So they are not just, they can be just an outlier, just a random, I'll say crazy person, but chances are they were impacted by significant adverse childhood experiences, and that shaped the way they were able to handle situations. So when we think about ACEs, I challenge you in your cases to apply this not just to the children that you work with, but also to the families that you work with. It doesn't mean that it's not traumatic for the children that these things occur. It just means that we can gain a little bit of understanding about the circumstances behind what's going on. And, you know, we won't always know what happened to the parents in their childhood, but very often that will come out as part of their story or part of the child's story. So we encourage you to keep ACEs in mind. I use the term ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences. We encourage you to keep those things in mind as you work with families and think about the impact that they can have, not just on the child, but on everyone involved in the case. And we, I believe, are due for just a short break, unless I forgot something.
No, you have not forgotten anything. We are ready for our first break.
And guys, get excited. We are not just on time. We are 3 minutes early, okay? We are 3 minutes earlier than we wanted to be, so we're not rushing through it this time. So we want you guys to take about a 5-minute break to turn your camera off, stretch, go to the restroom, grab a snack, refocus, and we'll come back and move on to the next activity. Thank you.
Hi guys. Fastest 5 minutes ever, right? Gonna give everybody a few minutes to pop back onto their screen or turn their videos and cameras back on. Kathy, I love your little Bitmoji person. Okay. Everybody ready? All right. Everybody can turn their cameras on whenever they pop back into the room and get close to their computers. So the next thing we're going to be talking about is asking the right questions and planning your next step. So this is activity 3C on page 14. So for a lot of our activities, we had been doing the breakout rooms, and we are no longer going to be incorporating those because we want to incorporate everybody in the large group setting. So for this activity, I want you guys to think about the blues case that you guys read over for pre-work, and think about any questions that you had about that. Right now would be the time to ask those, and let's talk through them. Does anybody want to go first about a question that they had about the blues case? Or maybe something about, as you were reading through the blues case or watching the videos, did you have a question that popped up that maybe as it regards to CASA, what you can, can't do? Sandy? Sandy, we can unmute you if you'd like. Did you have a question?
Alondra, can you hear me?
I can, Kathy, yes.
I guess I was, of course, I've been playing catch up, so I may be getting these different cases confused. But one thing that I was confused on is whenever you're meeting with the person and their child has been placed in foster care, but they acted like they really weren't sure why the child was taken. I guess you're not really able to go into detail about that. That's the caseworker. Is that correct?
And you're talking about meeting with that parent, that child's parent, correct?
Yes.
Right. So you are not required or obligated to inform the parents of, you know, anything. Pretty much you can. You are there for the child. So I actually did highlight on there where on the pre-work where it says, you know, you want to share information if it's going to benefit the outcome of the child, but it is the social workers or DCBS obligation to keep the parents up to date on what is going on. How should I put this into words? You don't really want to sway a situation either which way. So it's very delicate territory. So you want to just make sure I am here to observe. I'm here to gather information to be able to write a court report to the best of my knowledge. And we are here for the child and to gather information for the judge.
It's important too in these situations, because we're going to talk a little bit about professional communication tonight too. It's important not to feed into the confusion about the role that we play. So several families will get confused and be like, no, you're my social worker. And we frequently have to say, I am not your social worker. I am your CASA. I will work closely with your social worker, but I am not your social worker. And the same is true for attorneys. They'll ask us questions about court. And we can provide some information, but we never want to get caught in a situation where the parent says they didn't show up for court because the CASA told them the wrong time. So, you know, people will ask things like, what time am I supposed to be at court? I didn't think I had to go. Or does my dad have to be at court? He said he doesn't have to be. And so we are all often tempted to be like, well, the judge said if he doesn't come to court, then he's going to jail for 6 months. But we don't want we don't want to talk to kids about things like that. But also, we don't want to play that legal role either. So it's always a good idea when they have specific questions that you think are more appropriate for an attorney or a social worker or a teacher to say, you know, I'd be happy to talk with you about this a little bit, but I think it's really important that you follow up with your social worker and get some of those details. I think it's really important that you follow up with your attorney and get some of those details too.
Okay.
So we don't want to sway any information. We don't know what they already know, what they don't know, what they shouldn't be privy to. So again, we want to focus on what our role is, just like Alondra said, we're information gatherers, and our job is to report back to the judge. So we have to think really hard about whether it's going to benefit the child and whether it breaks any of our other codes or do's and don'ts, and make a really informed decision. So as always, like, it's some gray area, but it's always a good idea to refer them back to their social worker or attorney if those kind of questions come up.
And you can always give them, you know, their social worker name, phone number, contact information, all that information. You can give that out to them.
Okay.
A lot of times it'll be like, I don't have their phone number, or I haven't talked to them in 2 months or something. So
Thank you.
like I said, just refer them back to that. Anybody else have another question? That was a great question, Kathy. Thank
I
you.
just wanted to say one thing in relation to the video. I thought it was really good when the CASA worker, to kind of help calm things down, she didn't offer information, but she did offer to explain the role of each of the people, because the parent was saying, you know, it's this person, it's that person, you know, and I don't even know what they do in so many words. And I thought that was a really good, and the CASA worker was honest with her that she did convey information, you know, and things like that, you know, what her role was but she was not offering information in regards to any of these people, but she did offer to be a resource just to explain what they did.
That's
What these other people did.
I think she did a great job as well on explaining that. And with that, I wanted to add, whenever you go to visit the family for the first time and to visit the child, your supervisor will be going with you just to kind of help explain what the CASA does, what our role is, and what to expect from us. You know, that way it kind of gives that bridge to introducing you into the family and to the child as well. Thank you so much for pointing that out, Peter. Shai, did you have your hand raised?
Yes, but everyone that has put in their inputs, those are all great questions, and that was very helpful on my part of learning as well. One question that was coming to my mind was, in the case the child alone was a really young age, very young, and I was curious to know, like, as an advocate, ways to, I guess, techniques to like really interact with that child, since that child can't really speak on their own behalf, or you can't like get really engaged with them with like hands-on activities per se. So I wanted to know, as an advocate, some tips and tricks on how to look out for the child's best interests by of course, like, interacting with all parties, but just with that circumstance, I feel like it's a little different compared to children like ages 5 and up. You know what I mean?
I completely know what you're talking about. And I think you hit it right on the nail without even realizing it.
Yeah.
Being in contact with collaterals at that age and at any age is very important. Now, when you go visit a child, of course, right now due to COVID, we can't really go do face-to-face visits. But when you do go visit a child, interact with that child, get on the floor, play with them, you know, bring a board game, bring some coloring material, interact with them in something that it's age appropriate for them. Get to know them in that way, and they build trust and build a connection, build a rapport with them. But we do depend a lot on the foster parents to gather information that is going on with the children that cannot speak. You know, we want to know how they're behaving in the home. How are they getting along with the siblings? How are they getting along with the foster parents as well? And then we do rely very heavily on calling collaterals, calling the doctor's offices, being in contact with therapists, see how their therapy sessions are going, being able to do all of that. Ashley's gonna come back up here.
Because I tried to write her a note and my handwriting is so bad. She was like,
Look, what did that
no.
say?
Also a great way to do that, because I'll pick on Shy, because I know she's a staff person and she's very young and doesn't have any children or a ton of experience with kids. So if you don't and you're unsure about what you should be doing, now she's cracking up laughing at me because my handwriting is so bad. If you're unsure about what to do, please come by the CASA office. We have a huge shelf filled with toys, and we encourage you anytime you want to take a toy. Many of us have kids. We also have all the toys in a box, so it conveniently says like ages 6 to 12 months. And you can pick a toy that's age appropriate for that child and then use that as a jumping off point for getting to like hang out with them, get them excited for you to be there, and a new way for you to interact. Even if they're 6 months old or 12 months old, you can still start that relationship.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Does anybody else have any other questions?
Thank you guys. That was very helpful.
Thank you so much for having questions and being part of our communication and engaging with us. We love to hear from you guys.
I think Pooja has a question.
Pooja?
Oh, no, she just lowered her hand.
Oh.
Change your mind.
Oh, I do have a question. I don't know why it lowered. But so like when we do contact doctors' offices, like would they like give you like results or just anything just because of HIPAA violations and all?
Yes, so we will actually be hitting on that topic of retrieving confidential records later on in this training. But to answer your question, whenever you are appointed as a CASA onto a case, we fill out a form, or the judge signs the form. It's called an OCASA, which gives you rights to all the records that are associated with the child. That does not mean that how therapy is going for mom and dad. That means anything that has to do with that child. So you are able to call the doctor's office and request their 12-month-old checkup form if you needed it. Or request how therapy session went. You can call their therapist and say, hey, how is it going? Does he, is he making any progress? Anything like that. Now, if any of those collaterals ask, due to HIPAA, we cannot give you any of that information, that's when you would be able to show them or fax to them that copy of the OCASA and for them to have on file and to know that they're able to talk to you.
Okay.
Great question. Thank you. Yes, Allie?
Is it common for there to be is it common for CASAs to have a close relationship with birth parents? Like, I guess my question is, are birth or bio parents usually receptive to CASAs? Because I think that sometimes maybe if the best interest of the child is not to be reunified yet, I could see maybe where there would be some resentment from the bio parents to the CASAs. How do you handle that kind of situation?
That is a great question, Allie. And I think it just depends on a case-to-case basis. Some parents are very receptive to CASAs because they want their children back, and they're willing to do everything they can to have their children back in their home. So they want to work closely with anybody that's going to help them achieve that goal. Their CASAs, their social workers, their attorneys. Some parents, it may take them a little bit longer to achieve that goal, and they may have some resentment and not fully understand why their child was taken away. So when that happens, the judge does order, parenting classes, or they order psych evaluations and things like that. So they're able to have a better understanding of what's going on in their case and have tools and resources that's able to help them parent and be ready for when their child returns back into their home. Does that answer your question? Yes. All right. Thank you. And Peter, did you have a question?
I already spoke up.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Sorry, your hand is still up. I got it.
Sorry.
Gone.
All right. Does anybody else have a question? Romaine, you were being very quiet. I have not heard from you today very much.
She's still traumatized from starting school this week.
So no, I think just by listening to everybody else.
Yeah, it's answering your own questions that you've had.
Yeah, I think if nothing else, like it probably clarified some things that I may not have really known that I had like an actual question. Just, you know, it just gave me like further clarification. So
Yeah, awesome. Great.
I think Shy's on a mission to make us run late tonight.
Go ahead. Go for it, Shy.
I'm sorry, quick question. Based off of the facts of the case, though, of the actual case study that you guys read, what do you actually think happened to the child? Because the child had shaken baby syndrome, and it was allegations both towards mom and dad. What do you think actually happened? Or are we saying for the next week or the week after?
I don't think we ever find out. We don't find out what happens to in that case, or who was right or who was wrong.
Which, is a lot of the time how it happens. We have, I think, 2 active cases right now where that's the case. We think we know what happened, but we don't always know what happened. I will say that statistically, it was the dad. But
Okay.
I can't blame the dad. That's just a statistic.
Yeah.
But statistics show that with most abuses, but especially with shaken baby system, shaken baby or that abusive head trauma that he endured, that it is statistically, it would be mom's boyfriend, if she had one, would be the most likely person that did it, and the next it would be the dad, followed by the mom. So statistically, it was the dad. We, of course, don't know who it was, and in this case, it's not even necessarily it's definitely not our job in this case or any case to find out who did what.
Right.
Our job is to find out what's best for the child, to make sure that everyone has the resources that they need, because regardless, a lot of people played a part in this happening to the child. Now, maybe mom didn't know about it and dad did it, but there are still other contributing factors too. So everybody's going to need a lot of really strong resources to make it successful.
I agree. I guess my biggest worry would be like if we misinterpreted who did it, and then we advocate saying that child needs to make reunification for said parent, and that said parent ended up the harm. But again, we'll always go to our supervisors for clarification, perspective, all that good stuff. So it's very, very unlikely for that to happen. But those were the questions crossing my mind. And thanks, guys, so much for answering that for me.
And I'm going to elaborate on what you said, Shy, because I know that's a feeling that can weigh really heavy on a lot of us. Am I doing the right thing? Am I making the right recommendation? Am I sure? Am I sure about this? Do I feel really confident? And the answer is not always like, yes. We can't always be 100% sure. Our job, though, is to gather information and provide as much information as we can to the judge. And ultimately, we don't make decisions. Right. We make recommendations, and the judge takes our information, and in most of our cases, she takes the social worker's information. She takes the child's information. Of course, in this case, Deshaun wouldn't be able to talk about what happened, but in many cases, the kids, even young kids, 3, 4, 5, talk to the judge and say what they want. So she'll take the kids' recommendations or their wishes, and she'll also take, what the attorneys have to say, what the moms have to say, and ultimately the judge makes the decision based on that information. What we can do is make sure that we provide really high quality and comprehensive information. And then we might tack on our recommendation and our opinion there at the bottom based on our relationship with the child. But ultimately, we're not going to say, I think it was mom. I think, she's a shady character, and I think mom did it. What we're going to provide is medical records and mental health records for the child, or even some that we gathered, and make sure that the social worker who would have access to mom's mental health records shares that with the judge. We might dig up some history from the DCBS office that mom actually had another kid that she abandoned 12 years ago. And so we might find that information pertinent. So it's not just our job to form an opinion based on no information. It's our job to provide really comprehensive and high quality information to the judge so that she has the ability to make a really great decision based on what we're able to provide.
I agree, and that's a great way of explaining it. Thank you, Ashley.
You're welcome. Thanks for a great question.
All right. I think we have time for one more. If not, it's time for us to move on. Yay. All right, moving on. Ashley, if you want to pop up the PowerPoint just so we can stay on track. Because I have the book, but
we're way back here in trauma.
We've moved past that.
Oh, I went too far.
Okay, so we are going to talk about the effective communication, the basic elements of communication. So whenever you have communication with the collaterals and the foster parents and everybody involved in the case, you want to be very sensitive to how you portray that. But before we get into that, I want to do activity 3D. Is that part of the PowerPoint, you think? It's the basic elements of communication.
It's not part of the PowerPoint. It's just a discussion.
Okay, so let's do activity 3B, which is located on page 15 of your binder. And what it is think about a time when a friend, colleague, or family member and you had a miscommunication, and what is one thing that contributed to that miscommunication?
I hope you still have your marker board handy because I'm just throwing this out there for Alondra, and I want you to write it on your marker board.
Yay, marker board.
And I see a disgruntled face about having to write it on the marker board. You should just be happy I didn't ask you to draw it.
And I think we're going to be using the whiteboards again later on.
Yeah.
Okay. So a time where I had a miscommunication is, you know, through text, everything can be taken, you know, to it's rude or that's, you know, misinterpreted. So I would send things to my sister-in-law, you know, she would write a paragraph and I would just say, okay, cool, and like 2 words or 1 word. And she would take it as she doesn't want to talk to me, she doesn't like what I have to say. And when we got down to talking about it, I had to tell her about my day. I had to explain to her my day is very compact. My day is very busy. I don't really have time to sit down and, you know, write a full paragraph in response to your answer. I can give you like 3 words and that's it. You are more than welcome to call me because I can have a phone in my ear and be doing several different things. But it was that miscommunication of a text where I just sent 3 words back to her and she felt like I did not like what she was saying or I didn't appreciate what she was saying. Okay, who do we have to share from their marker board?
Raise them up, guys.
Will you help me with that because I can't see?
Romaine looks like she's still thinking.
Okay, I see Sarah. Sarah, will you unmute and tell me?
Yeah, you probably can't read my handwriting, but mine said texting as well. And that's something, that's actually something that my husband talks to me about all the time. And he's like, just pick up the phone and have a conversation because so often, you know, either what you're saying comes across maybe not the way that you intended it, or you don't know if the other person is going to interpret it a different way. I know just earlier, before I got on this call or on this Zoom meeting, I had to text somebody and he was like, you just need to pick up the phone and call. And I didn't, but I just tried to make my text clearer because sometimes, you know, it's hard, you know, and I get what you're saying about picking up the phone and you have time to talk instead of text, but sometimes it's vice versa too. But I do realize that texting can be it can be a little slippery slope.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I see Heather has one too.
Yes, mine also similar to texting. I always text this to my husband because I have a million and one things in my brain all the time going on. And so when I need to talk to him about something important, if it's something with the kids in school or I want to plan a vacation or something, I'll send him a text message and say, I need to talk to you about something. And he absolutely cannot stand it because he thinks it's something horrible every single time. He says, why do you say it like that? And I'm like, because I need you to remind me later when you get home from work that we need to talk about something. And he's like, it sounds like you're getting ready to say something horrible when you say that, but really I'm just putting it out there so that he'll remember to ask me about it. But he can't stand it. He thinks it sounds like something horrible.
Do you think it might be all men? Because I did that to my husband once, and he kept calling me throughout the day and said, "Is everything okay? Did I do something? Like, do I
Yes.
do something?" Like, I'm like, no, it's not even about you.
Right. It's really about, we need to talk about the school for the boys, but he's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know. They're like, oh man. All right. Do we have anybody else?
Anybody? I saw a lot of text message.
Okay. Lots of text messages.
And you guys were all really serious. But when I make text message miscommunications, it's very rarely like that someone misinterpreted it. It's usually that I put something really weird because of voice to text or autocorrect. Like something just totally off the wall and crazy, and they're like, what about ninjas? Sorry, wrong word. It misheard me. But I saw a lot of text communication. And I think that's a good reminder too, Alondra, that with professional communication, we do have the opportunity to do a lot of these more informal styles of communication, even with other professionals. So email, text, calling. Now we do FaceTime and Zoom and different kinds of calls with other professionals. So as we get into that and we're talking about professional communication, it's important to remember to be as careful and professional as we can be with other people too.
Yes. And with that comes the 3 forms or components of communication. Does anybody know them? No? Okay. So verbal, nonverbal, and feeling. So of course, verbal is everything that is said, actual words that are spoken. Nonverbal are gestures, tones, or other unspoken means of communication. Thank you, Ashley. And then feelings refers to the experiences as the result of the communication. Like, how does those words or tones make that other person receiving those that communication feel? So we want to make sure that we are aware of our surroundings and aware of the situation on how we communicate at all times. No matter who we're speaking to, we want to make sure that we are using a professional manner. Always represent yourself professionally. Does not mean that you have to have a really high vocabulary. Just be very clear and very upfront with what you are trying to portray. We don't want to leave anything in a gray area. Does anybody have any questions about the 3 components of communication? No? Okay, next slide. Child interview role play.
We're skipping it, guys.
We are skipping this.
So I love this part. I love when we can put you guys in small, uncomfortable groups, and then we make one of you pretend like you're 12 or 5 and have the other person interview you. It's one of my favorite things because then I get to see who's a really great actor or actress and who really takes it too far by like refusing to answer questions as they believe a 4- or 5-year-old would do. But we're going to skip that, not just in the sake of time, but also out of respect for the fact that several of you guys were not really feeling the breakout rooms. So you spared your teammates and your fellow trainees from doing that awkward role play. If you want to do a role play, hold on tight because we will do one. Not next week. No, it is next week. So hang on to that.
Yes. All right. So when you were,
That's the same
that's
activity.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so obtaining confidential records. And Pooja, this is the slide for you. So like I was saying, as a court-appointed advocate, you have access to a child's records, whether that be from the doctor's office, therapy, school, anybody that has anything to do with the child or anybody that works with the child. You have access to those records. So sometimes to obtain parents' records, we have to submit a signed formed by the parents to that agency. Some parents are willing to do that. Some parents not so much. So I guess it's just a case-to-case basis. If you do need those records from that parent or from the therapist of that parent, then we can ask the parent to sign that and see if they're willing to. So to obtain the information from the Child Protective Service agencies and schools, like I was talking about, the CASA, you are able to submit that. A lot of the DCBS reports that they submit to the judge, we have access to those as at CASA supervisors, and we can share those with you. Those reports usually maintain the case plan and what they the steps that they want the parents to follow. And then as the supervisors provide direction on how best to access Child Protective Services documents and those school forms. So I find that, you could always call the school and say, I'm wanting to see the attendance record for Johnny. And they say, well, we need a signed release from the parents. And then you can fax them the CASA. Said, actually, I am a court-appointed advocate for this child, and I have this form signed by the judge that allows me to view any records associated with Johnny. So sometimes it's very easy as submitting the court report to the agencies. Take a break. To the agencies that you're trying to gather information from, but sometimes they do push back. And if you're having difficulty with that, just please reach out to us because we can help with that. We are able to, inform them a little bit more about CASA and what CASAs do. Okay. All right. Let's move on to our next slide. Be ready?
What does the O stand? What's the O for? Did I miss that?
No, you didn't.
You didn't miss it, and Alondra's sliding over and looking at me because she's like, does it stand for Owensboro? What does CASA stand for? Guess what? We have no idea. So I, too, asked that question early on, and so we started asking around, like, what is it? Is it because we're in Owensboro? Is it because we're CASA of Ohio Valley? Like, where does the O come from? Not even all counties have OCASAs. They all have different names. It's an AOC form, but it's not consistent. So we have no idea what the O in OCASA stands for. There you go. No idea. It's just an OCASA. Unless Robin can jump in if you ever did find out. But that was the last word that I got on it. Robin?
I did not find out. I think in my mind, I think it stands for order, but I don't know for sure.
That's a better guess than Owensboro.
For sure.
I'll put it on my list to clarify that. I'm just not sure either.
Okay, so let's move on to page 17 of your binders is obtaining confidential records. We kind of briefly talked about this, and we might just want to skip that as well since we have talked about it a lot. And it was just simply saying what confidential records may you want to obtain for the child. And we discussed, school, therapy, doctor's appointments, things like that, or some of the records that you would want to see. Next is our flow chart. So our flow chart, I am going to invite Ashley to come talk about that.
Thank you, Alondra. And I think it was Allie who asked earlier about it was Kathy, about what to share and what not to share. And whether it's confidential, which essentially everything in the cases are confidential, or not, this is a really great just kind of gut check, see if this is appropriate information to share or why it might be. You have this in your binder. It's on page 19, and I'm not going to go deep into it because I have absolute confidence that you guys can read and follow a flow chart. It's just a good check. If you're in, you get an email at 7 o'clock one night and you're like, yeah, I'm not sure if I should share that or not. It's dad's attorney. And I don't know if dad's attorney is privy to this information. I don't know if I should share this with dad's attorney or not. You can kind of come back. Is it in the best interest to share this information? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Is it my information to share? Maybe, maybe not. Is the person legally entitled to the information? And so if you can answer yes to all those questions, you go on and share it. If it's not, our flowchart here has a lot of great ideas and ways to think about, reorganizing that, getting them the information from some other direction, or as with most of these questions, just finally getting back to talking with your supervisor and going over with your supervisor whether it is appropriate or in the child's best interest to share it. All right, and actually there's another slide here on communication, but I think we are going to go ahead and move into talking about mental health. Nope, just kidding. We're not going to talk about mental health. We are, actually we are going to talk about mental health tonight, but that's not where the slides are going to take us. So we're going to talk a little bit about mental health and about poverty. You guys did a little bit of pre-work in your, I call it homework because I'm used to doing homework with kids and pre-work slips away from me for some reason. But in your homework or your pre-work, you would have answered some questions and looked at some information on mental health and poverty. Specifically, actually now we're going to, Alondra, if you don't mind, if you could take the screen share away so we can see each other's faces. Thank you. Yay, I like that better where I can see all you guys. Maybe you guys could always see everybody, but I could only see about 4 of you. I don't like seeing all your faces. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is mental health and having a better understanding of mental health. Now, I'm a little intimidated right now because there are a few professionals who deal with mental health on my screen. So if any of you mental health professionals want to add anything, feel free to do that. What we want to talk about tonight, though, regarding mental health is that it plays a part in many of the cases that we deal with. When we ask the judge what are the greatest issues facing the kids that she serves, she'll say, we have sex abuse cases, we have physical abuse cases, we have cases where it's severe neglect, but really when we dig down into these cases, the vast majority of them deal with substance abuse. We'll talk about substance abuse next week, but we also know that substance abuse and mental health go hand in hand together. So we see mental health issues affecting many of the parents and kids that we deal with, which points straight back to the adverse childhood experiences that we have. There are some taboo issues around mental health still in our community. Some families feel they don't have access to high quality mental health, or they're inconsistent with mental health. They don't feel like they have access to medication. But really, when we talk about mental health for CASA training, we want you to focus on the mental health of the kids that you are serving. We have many, many children who are involved in CASA who receive mental health services. And it's important that we support the child and their care provider as they go through this, but also report really consistently to the judge whether or not the child's mental health needs are being met. Again, we face this in a lot of cases, and because so many people do have strong opinions and strong feelings about mental health, it's important to remember to really advocate for the child and to do so passionately and in your own way, but to set your biases aside and really focus on what can benefit the child. One of the things that we see often is that people have really strong feelings about whether children are medicated or not. And some people feel like they should really be medicated really quickly. And some people feel like they should really never be medicated ever. And it's perfectly okay for you to have that opinion, but it's also really important to check that opinion and make sure that you're doing something that is consistent with what the child needs and what is socially and culturally appropriate for that child. So if it's acceptable in their family, then let's, discuss what would be in their best interest. If it's not acceptable in their family, let's talk about why it's not acceptable for them to be in mental health treatment. And I think Kathy's got a hand raised. Yes, ma'am.
In regards to children and mental health, I know we have limited, or in my opinion, there's not a whole lot of resources for adult mental health locally. What about for children and their mental health needs?
It depends on the level of mental health needs that they have. You're exactly right. We do not have enough psychiatrists in our community. So sometimes there are long waiting lists. We have a few providers here in town that offer psychiatric and then, of course, medication services. But I think Sandy's got a hand raised. I'll get right to you, Sandy, unless you can answer the question. Can you answer it?
There is also people can go out of the community, like to Evansville or somewhere like that, and get help also with the mental health.
Absolutely. We do have local issues with insurance, whether the child is in the custody of the cabinet or not. They sometimes have issues with whether their insurance provider will provide that resource to them. We have a lot of therapists that are willing and able to take children and provide therapy to children. We also have Brain Power, which is not specifically local, but is close by, that can offer mental health services to children. River Valley, certainly many personal and private providers. And Alondra is writing me a frantic note saying Andrea, who doesn't have her hand raised. But oh, she does have her hand raised. All right, Andrea wants to add something. No? Yes?
I was just going to say that, because I do have to deal with the mental health thing a lot, that for the kids, River Valley is going to be your go-to place for kids, especially in an after hours kind of situation. But there's very limited resources for kids in our area. But they also, we use New Beginnings a lot too. They have trauma-informed therapists there, and it's free. So I think it's one of those resources that people really don't know that we have in our area. We definitely recommend them a lot to people. So just putting that out there.
Wonderful. Thank you, Andrea, for reminding us about New Beginnings and sharing that River Valley is one of the providers that does offer services to kids, and especially, like you said, after hours. If you're in crisis, that's probably where the kids are going to end up. And I don't mean like they're going to have to stay there overnight, but that's probably where they're going to get evaluated. I also wanted to share with you guys that at least for the next few months, we have a grant that is helping us collaborate with a local mental health provider, and he works through True North. His name is Evan, and we can utilize him as a resource for our families when they're in crisis. He is not intended to be providing long-term therapy to any of our kids, but when our families end up in crisis, we do have his phone number, and he is available to do a little bit of that crisis management and to help work our families through that. So if you get assigned a case and you find that your family is in need of a quick, not a quick fix, but a quick intervention, then you can always get in touch with us, and he can help connect them to a longer term therapist and help them handle that imminent crisis situation. Thank you, Andrea and Sandy and Kathy, for getting us on that train of thought and answering some of those questions. Does anybody else have any questions or comments about mental health? Everybody's like, no more questions. Mental health is too touchy. So we're going to move right on to something that's way easier. Poverty. Not easier at all. But you guys did quite a bit of pre-work around poverty, so we want to discuss that just a little bit with you guys. So I'm going to ask Alondra to come back up here so she can put you guys on the spot and see how many of you guys did your pre-work where we talk about like the statistics and number of people who live in poverty and all of those fun issues.
All right, guys. So if you will flip, or if I will flip to your pre-work where it asks you to find the minimum wage for our area. Who is able to answer that question? And Ashley, if you will help me call on them while I look for these questions.
Heather has her hand raised. Heather.
Yes, $7.25 an hour, which is unbelievable, really. When I did the math, that times a 40-hour work week just seems unbelievable that somebody could live on that.
Yes, and I think $7.25 an hour has been the minimum wage for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I think it said since 2009, maybe.
That's crazy to me. All right, next question. What are the current poverty guidelines for a family of 4 in your state? I don't know if you guys found this one. Romaine's going to unmute.
Yeah, Romaine, take it away.
So I think when I looked it up for the state of Kentucky for a family of 4, it was a little over 26,000.
Okay, sounds right to me. And Peter is agreeing. Yay.
Peter
No,
had
200 or less.
I'm sorry, what was that, Peter?
26,200 or less.
26,200 or less. Yep. Thank you
And
for
I
finding
couldn't
that.
imagine supporting 4 people on 26,000.
No.
And that's gross income. That's before taxes.
Yeah. And I think a lot of agencies that ask for your income levels want to know, what you make before taxes too, which to me is crazy because that's some money you don't even count on. Like a lot of money is taken for taxes, and they're making it seem like they make a lot more than what they really do or bring home. So what percent of people of color in your state fall within the poverty guidelines? So did anybody find that one out?
Peter's got his hand up.
Peter?
29.2%.
Did you say 29?
29.2%.
29.2%. What about for the white population in our state?
16.7.
16.7. Is that what
Which is
everybody
actually very high for the country.
Oh.
Both are high for the country, but for Caucasian white population, that's high.
Thank you for finding that. You guys did a great job. Thank you. All right.
I know everyone is shocked to find out that we live in a very poor state, right? Everyone's totally surprised. No one knew that, right? Yeah, no one's surprised at all. And also, I would say no one is surprised that people of color are disproportionately affected by poverty. And we will go into quite a bit next week, some of those issues, but tonight we're gonna just focus on poverty as a whole and how that impacts families. So when we're talking about poverty and we're talking about families who are represented in the family court system, what do you guys think? Do you think more people in poverty are in court than people who are not in poverty? Some like gentle head shaking, like I feel like the answer is yes. Peter, did you unmute?
The main reason it's yes is because people with higher incomes have more access to resources and more resources available.
Absolutely. That's the number one thing that I want.
It's not that many of the same problems and issues that don't happen. It's just the availability of resources due to income.
110%. When we talk about poverty, that is the number one thing I want you to take away from this conversation. Is not that people in poverty disproportionately neglect or abuse their children, but that disproportionately they do not have access to services that prevent those things from happening and disproportionately they are penalized for it. So what one of the attorneys that we work with often says is that there are plenty of people with drug habits that live on the nicest streets in town. It's just that their habit is cocaine and not meth, and they don't get in trouble for it. So it's not that they do not exist, it's that it is just disproportionately appears in our court system, typically due to lack of resources, but also just familiarity with the system and that ability to get away with it, I guess. So that's what we want you to know, that abuse and neglect happen across all demographics of people. So all people, whether they are Black, white, Hispanic, it happens in every culture. It happens across every socioeconomic class. It happens to people of both genders, and people of both genders perpetrate it, for that matter. So it can and does affect every style and type of person. So we want you to remember that, but also to remember that because people who live in poverty do disproportionately appear in our system, we need to be very attuned and attentive to the different needs that they may have and that may be present because they live in poverty. So when we talk about access to mental health, I know Sandy mentioned earlier that Evansville is a resource, and it absolutely is a resource. I've shared with a couple of advocates that I have even accessed resources for my own family in Evansville, but it is important for us also to remember that not every family has the ability to use transportation to get to Evansville. Yeah. Their insurance may not allow them to seek services in another state because their insurance is state provided. It may be that they have a car, but their car is not good enough to make it that far, or they don't have enough money to put gas in it. They don't have flexibility with their schedule, or they don't have the ability to take off and lose the hours at work to be able to make ends meet, because we just talked about how hard it is, or how hard it would be to get by for a family of 4 on just a minimum wage job. Imagine if you had to take 6 hours off to drive somewhere like Louisville to access really high quality mental health or medical services. So when we talk about families who live in poverty, it really affects the services that are accessible to them. When we talk about accessible, we don't want to talk about just things that are available, because even though a resource may be available in Evansville, or it may be available in Owensboro, it may not be accessible to that family because they live in poverty. So we want to keep that in mind as we are working with the families that we work with. Again, just my number one takeaway would be that it happens in all families. So if you see a family driving a really, really nice car and the mom is getting out, like smacking their kid across the face, don't think, well, they're rich, like they can't be abused. They certainly can and are. And don't let that color the way you feel, and also go back to that best interest principle that we talked about last week and the minimum sufficient level of care. When we think about families that live in poverty, it's important to remember that the family may not look like ours, they might not live in a house that looks like ours, but they may still be able to meet their child's needs. So I was going to say, Alondra, your face looks really weird. So I'm going to let Alondra take it from there.
Thank you, Ashley. That pretty much wraps up poverty for us. One thing I do want to mention, we had a really cool activity set up for poverty during our time together. Unfortunately, we are going to put that, I say unfortunately, but I really like you guys to do it. We're going to put that in the pre-work for chapter 4 pre-work, and what it is a link that will send you to a kind of like a virtual situation. So it's going to make you make decisions as if you only had a certain amount of money to spend. It's going to make you have real life situations like, do you take the bus or do you walk? Do you go to the doctor because you're sick, or do you tough it out? And it's going to let you realize how much money is spent. So it was a really cool activity, and I would like to hear your feedback from that next time we come see each other again, whether you made it or you ran out of money and became homeless. That's the essential thing. Either you finish the activity with money or you're homeless. All right, so to wrap up, I want to talk a little bit about the court report. I know that your homework was to identify sections of the court report. I think everybody did an amazing job with that. Ashley and I were looking through that, and everybody went in and identified all the scenarios in there, and were able to mark in the court report where those were located. So yay, everybody.
I'm telling Alondra, she was like, we need to really look at these because I missed a couple of them when I did this activity when I was going through training, and I sat there right next to her and graded them. I was like, well, everybody got them right. So you guys did great, and that's what we want to talk about. I mentioned to Sarah when I was talking with her earlier today that I owe you an apology, and Robin immediately after training was like, hey, we didn't talk to them about Optima at all, and you asked them to do Optima in their homework or in their pre-work for next week. And I was like, let's see how they do. And you guys did amazing. With limited or no guidance, you guys either were able to work it out or get us a message to let us know that you needed a little bit more guidance on working it out. So if that comes up again in your pre-work, just know that it is probably because I made a mistake of some kind and forgot to go over something or forgot to attach something. So please continue to feel comfortable reaching out to us and asking those questions and keeping us honest about the work we're doing.
Okay, that wraps us up for tonight. So we, once again, will stay on here for a few more minutes and answer any questions that you guys have. If you don't have any, you're free to go spend the rest of your night.
Thank you.
Before anybody jumps off, Allie's kids, either Allie's kids were awesome or she's really good at the mute button. But either way, it was fantastic.
My 7-year-old just brought the baby up and was like, I'm done, Mom. I can't do it anymore.
Wrap it up.
No limits.
I want to go ahead real quick and ask everybody, if you have not already looked at court times for court observations, if you don't mind doing that, you can send it to me now for observations weeks away, but the sooner you let me know, the sooner I block off your time. So far, I've only gotten 2, so just be looking at your calendars on Tuesdays. And see
is Tuesday like absolutely a no for anybody? Is it just like, hey, Tuesdays are never going to work for me? You guys got flexible schedules. I love it. All right.
Clara,
Susan, we need to just pick a Tuesday between now and
the end of the training. If you can just pick a Tuesday and get with me, just shoot me an email or my text is on that form. If you just want to, Clara actually asked a question about not knowing where to get the form. You don't need the form right now to schedule the time. We'll give you a little bit more information about that when we get closer to your time, or I can let you know how to get to that form. Right now, I just need to get your time scheduled. So just shoot me an email or a text and let me know which Tuesday, and I'll ask you, if you want the morning or the afternoon, and then we'll just block off an hour during that time frame that works best for you. Okay. Do we already have your email?
I'm sorry?
Do we already have your email?
You should. I think it's in. I think it was.
I'll type it in the chat box right now, but it should also be in your week 2 envelope. And Susan actually may not be CC'd on any, but I'll type it in the chat box now.
Her phone number is on that form, though. It should say contact Susan, and it has her cell phone number.
I'm going to go ahead and put my cell phone on here just in case, because some of them don't know where the form is right now. So just to schedule, this is my cell phone. Just anybody that wants to can text me on that. Hold on, I guess I should put my name on there so you know whose it is. So you guys can just text me at that number or call me, whichever works better for you. And just that way I can go ahead and get you on the schedule. I don't want you to have just a specific time and wait till the end, and I've already filled up all of that time. So the sooner you let me know, the sooner you get the time you want.
Thank you.
First come, first serve.
Yeah.
This is probably a dumb question, but this isn't something that we would need to take a day off of work for.
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
We
No.
are able to, especially right now, since Skype is virtual, you are able to do it in a quiet place as long as you keep in mind confidentiality, making sure that you wear your headphones. You know, nobody's able to hear what's going on in the courtroom. Just sit at your office or in a corner, and that's when you'll need the form that was located in your week 2 folder. There are about 8 questions in there that you will fill out while watching the case.
Okay.
I'm gonna add in there as a response to Heather's question too, that if you have, I was gonna say difficult work schedule, but not necessarily difficult. If your work schedule or life schedule doesn't allow you to pick any of the traditional times, get with us and let us know, because we occasionally have odd hearings on Thursdays. Still doing court at 8 o'clock on Tuesday. So if you guys find that it's not working for you, let us know, and we'll do everything we can to make sure that it fits into your schedule. But it's only required for an hour. So Heather, if you just need to do it on your lunch break, let Susan know that, and we'll work with you to try to make sure that we can do it during your lunch hour, or if you don't go in until 10, to do it at 9.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other questions?
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Pooja, are you staying on to talk about the email?
Yeah, about the email. I mean, that cleared up a lot of the questions that I did have. And then I was having a hard time logging into my Optima.
Okay. What is your username that you are using?
The pooja.patel.training. The one that's like on the binder.
Okay. Robin is our Optima guru on here, so she is probably looking at it right now and trying to figure out if there was a extra letter, missing letter, something like that. Same issue last week with Romaine.
Okay.
Good night, everybody.
Bye, Sandy. Robin, you're muted.
Okay, Pooja, I was just able to get in. Pooja.patel.training. Training's all caps. And then your password is be the one exclamation point.
Okay, because that's what I was using, unless I'm not using the right website. But...
Yeah, let me, I had somebody have an issue with that last week too. So when you are on the CASAOV.org, if you're going in through our website, what you may be inclined to do is click, as soon as you go to the website, click the button at the top right of the page. That's not where you want to go. That's our real Optima site.
Yeah, this is like the training one.
You were clicking on the training one?
Yeah, I mean, I can read you the URL.
Robin, what if you type it in exactly onto the chat box, and then Pooja, if you will copy and paste it into Optima?
Okay.
Look at you, Alondra, being a problem solver.
I don't know if it'll work, but we'll see.
Look at you, Robin.
Thank you, Robin. Teamwork, guys. Teamwork.
Did you guys like my floating hand? Like it just came out of nowhere with a green screen.
Okay, yes, I'm in.
Yay! All right, let's save that. All right. Pooja, do you have any other questions?
No, that was about it.
All right, perfect. All right, well, I think that wraps us up for tonight.
Have a good night.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Bye.